Oklahoma City Police is investigating an officer-involved shooting which occurred late last night on December the 1st, just before 11 p.m. That's when an officer of the Oklahoma City Police Department, who is identified this morning as Sergeant Jason Burgess, made a traffic stop at Northwest 16th and Rockwell. Just a routine traffic stop, exited his vehicle, made contact with a driver and two passengers, obtained their information, went back to his vehicle, and then ran them for warrants. When he did this, he discovered that at least two of the occupants, including the driver, had multiple municipal warrants and were wanted. He then called for backup officers to help him take them into custody. This is something that's routinely done when an officer's by himself and he has multiple subjects in the vehicle. When the officers got there, they approached the vehicle and took the driver into custody. She's been identified as Renard Bree Jones. As she was being handcuffed, an individual who was in the vehicle exited the vehicle, produced a semi-automatic weapon, and began to shoot at the officers. Two officers were injured. One was shot in the leg. This was Sergeant Burgess. The second officer, Jonathan Davis, was injured his hand. We still don't know exactly how he did so. The officers returned fire at the suspect, at the deceased, who's been identified as Lincoln Price. He was shot at the scene and he was pronounced dead. The officer that was hit with gunfire was transported to an area hospital. He was treated and he was released that evening after a few hours. The second officer that was injured, he was treated at the scene and released. At this point in time, obviously it's going to be a lengthy investigation. What we have to work with is multiple vehicles, police vehicles that sustained gunfire. Obviously we have the weapon that the suspect used, and witness statements. So at this point in time, the officers are going to all be placed on routine administrative leave until we conduct a full investigation and figure out exactly what transpired.
I know your officers are trained for anything, but how do your officers deal with going up on these traffic stops on the cars when you don't know if the person inside has a weapon that they may or may not use on you?
Well, it's a very difficult situation. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, you always try to be very courteous, very professional when you interact with people. Me personally, I try to, I'm as respectful as I can be and, make them feel at ease. But at the same time, you have to know that anything can happen. And, some of the officers are a little bit on the edge because they have to expect anything. They have to be professional, be courteous. But at the same time, just know that something like this could happen. So very scary for the officer. We're glad that he trusted his instincts and he called for backup before he reapproached the vehicle. That may have saved his life right there, having those extra officers there to help him.
Just to be clear, I know that the person with outstanding warrants in the vehicle was the woman. So she was the one being placed into handcuffs, and then Lincoln Price came out of the passenger side.
That's correct. The woman who was the driver, last name Jones, she had outstanding warrants, multiple warrants, and the second occupant, Roger Gurley, also had outstanding warrants. The shooter in this case had no warrants. So again, this is, we have to figure out why he would do something like this. We do know that he's a convicted felon. He's in our gang file as being a gang member. He'd been to prison. He'd been arrested for possession of a firearm after conviction of felony. So it's quite possible that he just didn't want to go back to prison because he was in possession of a firearm, and he saw this as an easy way out.
How many how many times you said multiple cars were hit with gunfire? So there were a lot of rounds that were fired by the suspect.
Well, you have to understand that this is the weapon which was used by Mr. Price is a semi-automatic weapon with multiple rounds. So I don't know exactly how many rounds he fired at the officers, but I can tell you that at least two of the police cars were hit. They sustained damage, multiple gunshots to the vehicles, and then obviously the officer who was injured. So it is our belief that this individual had full intentions of getting away, and if that meant to kill an officer, then apparently he was willing to do that.
Both officers returned fire?
I don't know how many officers returned fire. There were a total of 4 officers at the scene. The original officer, Jason Burgess, was an 11-year veteran of our police department. Jonathan Davis, the officer who sustained an injury to his hand, he's a 10-year veteran. And then you have 2 other officers, Coffey and Wilson, 6-year veteran and 3-year veteran. So, a mixture of experience there, but once again, fortunately, somebody lost his life, but very fortunately for us is that the officers went home to their families that night.
Paco, maybe you can answer this. Recently, we know that Oklahoma City Police Department has increased their presence in that part of the town, could this attribute to the number of officers getting there so rapidly and possibly save an officer's life?
Well, that is an area where we operate a safe grant, an Oklahoma Safe Grant, to have extra officers in that particular area, because there has been a lot of violent crimes, and obviously we want to reduce that. Last night, I don't know if that was one of the particular nights that officers work overtime. I don't believe that it was. From what I understand, none of these officers were working overtime. They were all just Hefner second and third shift officers who were at the scene. But once again, very fortunate that they could make it there that quickly in time before this individual exited his car and started firing at our officer.
It goes without saying, although they've been placed on leave, the fact that they were being shot at by the suspect, I mean, it appears that they had every right to return fire and do what they did, basically.
Well, like any other case like this one, we have to look at every aspect of the situation, every shred of evidence, every eyewitness, every physical evidence that's at the scene. So that's going to be done. That's going to take a while for us to determine exactly what happened. And like any other shooting, it's going to be highly scrutinized, and it should be, to make sure that everything went according to what the officer's training is. But obviously, it's pretty obvious to just even the lay person that when somebody comes out unprovoked and starts shooting at officers, well, obviously they have the right to return fire and protect themselves and protect the other citizens in the neighborhood.
Was this a residential neighborhood where there?
It's a mixture. It's a residential neighborhood, but that particular street, Rockwell, there's several businesses on there, so it's kind of a mixture. The actual location where the car pulled into is an apartment / business. So.
Thank you.
Sure.